So usually when I do this, I kind of like to know who I'm talking to. Are any people here filmmakers? Raise your hand. Yeah, no. Okay. Who here is from Hong Kong or has an emotional connection to Hong Kong or used to live there or whatever? Okay. This is not the first time I'm screening the film, of course, but I am pretty nervous tonight because I think this is a very discerning crowd. All my best friends in the world are like here tonight. And in some way, this is it's my first film as a director, and this is kind of my way of saying, this is what I've been doing for the last 5 years that I've been gone. So, the film, I'm not going to tell you what the film is about, you're about to see it. But I will tell you why I made it. Did you guys know that Hong Kong is the only place in the world that has an expiration date? And what I mean by that is that on July 1st, 2047, our mini constitution, which is a political system that we've had for almost 300 years, something that protects and enshrines the freedoms that we all grew up with, will end. At that date, Hong Kong will just become another city in mainland China. And Hong Kong's a lot like America, actually. No one's actually from there. I mean, very few people are from there. Many people come from, of course, China. They come from India, they come from Pakistan, from Vietnam and Thailand. And everyone came there because they were fleeing, throughout the 20th century, war, civil war, famine, political persecution, dictatorships, whatever. So it's a lot like America, and they came to Hong Kong in search of a better life and in search of a life lived free. And something that makes Hong Kong unique as a Chinese city is that it's the only city in China where there still is the freedom of speech and the freedom of assembly and civil liberties and the rule of law. And that's what I feel gives Hong Kong its essential energy and its spirit. That's the same freedom that my father also risked his life to swim from mainland China to Hong Kong in 1972 during the Cultural Revolution. But I always thought it was kind of crazy to grow up in a place with an expiration date. It's kind of like, what would you do if you knew that you only had like 5 years to live? How would you spend that time? Or, it's like a city is not a kind of pineapple that like Takeshi Kaneshiro, collects from 7-Eleven like he does in Chungking Express. So the film you're about to see is a love story set in the last fishing village of Hong Kong. Because 200 years ago, Hong Kong wasn't a city. It was just a bunch of fishing villages. But if you go to those spaces today, you'll find that their culture, the fishermen's way of life, their unique dialect, even the special saltwater songs they sing are all but gone. And it'll probably happen to the city of Hong Kong itself. So The White Girl is not a film. As I was thinking about what to say today, looking back on all the years it took to make this film, I think it's just one step in a long process to give a disappearing place an everlasting form. I hope you'll see what I mean. We'll talk more later. I'll be here to answer questions after the screening. But before I go, I want to thank the San Francisco Film Festival for inviting me and bringing the film here. It's the second time my film has screened at the festival, but it's my first time to be able to share the work in person. So thank you so much for supporting my work and Chris Doyle's work, and we hope we'll be able to come back again. Enjoy.
Let's be sure to silence our phones and put them away, and we will see you after the show. Thank you so much. What a beautiful film, right? Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Welcome back to
Thank you so much for coming to the film. It's an honor for me to have all of you guys here.
Well, we're very honored to have you here. So welcome. So let's start. As a co-writer, I want to start with like the beginning of the story for you. And you gave us like this very eloquent introduction, but I'm also curious if you could kind of tell us a little bit about for you, and encompassing all of that, how the story came to be for you in writing this film.
Okay.
Like, where did it start for you?
Have you guys seen In the Mood for Love?
Yes.
Yeah? In the Mood for Love was the first film that made me want to make a film. And it was also the first film that made me feel... I mean, I don't know if anyone... I guess you're probably not familiar. Hong Kong in the 90s was a very, like, money-driven place. So if you grew up there and you want to be an artist or you want to be a filmmaker, all you want to do is dream. I mean, all you want to do is dream of growing up, becoming 18, and going to New York or Paris and run away from your bourgeois family and go off and, you know, try to live a bohemian life. But I didn't, because I guess I like my parents too much. But when I watched In the Mood for Love for the first time, I was in university, and I was like, wow, someone made something like this in Hong Kong. And I guess, it opened my eyes to the possibility of a different kind of voice. Right. Where I thought it was all just one thing that I had no connection with whatsoever. It was like, I grew up there. And so when I wrote this thing, actually I never wanted to be a director. I only wanted to be a director because I wrote this short story, which in some way was my way of trying to go home after going to the States and whatever. And I gave it to Chris Doyle, and Chris Doyle said, let's make this into a movie. And I said, oh, okay. And I'm like, you know...
But can you tell us how you met Chris Doyle, maybe, perhaps, in that?
Later at the bar.
Okay.
But...
So a script, you showed him
a short
story,
really short, like 10 pages. And I gave it to him, and he said, oh, let's make a movie. And I said, okay, I'll write it, I'll produce it, because I had a day job in the business at the time. Yeah. And you shoot it, but who's going to direct it? Because I had never, you know, I think when I grew up, when I was a kid, I wanted to grow up and like be an astronaut or something, and like absurd things. Not as absurd as a film director, and he said, oh, let's make it into a film. And I said, who's going to direct it? Yeah. He said, oh, well, we will. Why would you? As if I was something, as if I had asked a really stupid question. So that was about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago.
Right. Yeah. So then so you handed him a short story, as you said, like 10 pages, but you've made a feature film. So I'm curious how then you grew that into the feature. Like, what was that process like for you?
Painful. Okay. I think for both Chris and I, it was a way, and we've said this before, it's a way for us to go back home. When I met him, he was doing, it was like during this strange sojourn of him doing shooting these Hollywood movies. I don't know, like it was like Liberty Heights. When I met him, he was doing the Mitch Glazer movie with the Transformers girl. I can't remember her name. Megan Fox.
Megan Fox, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's Australian, but there isn't a single person who doesn't consider him from Hong Kong. Right. And I was living in LA at the time, so I think for us, the films that we've made whether it was this one or Hong Kong Trilogy, have been a kind of way to figure out how we fit back into where we come from, or to give back to something, to a place that we feel gave us so much.
Right, and I think a big part of your film a lot is also about nostalgia, and I don't mean that in a, I actually mean it in like a very fascinating and beautiful way in terms of the footage that you use in pieces that connect you back to memory, and I was curious if you could talk a little bit about that.
So obviously I grew up on all the Wong Kar-wai films in some way, and I can't even watch them anymore because they're so, I feel like my experience of them is so divorced from the thing itself now that I can't really watch them without feeling so emotional that I just have to turn it off. I was born in 1983. I don't know when Wong Kar-wai was born. Chris was born in 1952. The directors that we all think of as the iconic Hong Kong film directors of the golden age of Hong Kong cinema in the 90s, no matter, of course we think of nostalgia as in terms of Wong Kar-wai, but there were others also. And I read this book when I was in college in the States called Akbar Abbas. It was by Akbar Abbas, a cultural studies scholar. It was like something the culture of disappearance, and he looked at these all, not just film but all of Hong Kong culture in the 90s, and he said that the moment Hong Kong realized that it would be gone was the moment Hong Kong realized it was unique. And that resonated so much with me, because if you look at the I don't know, like GOD, which is like a very famous Hong Kong design brand, it was like they were like elevating this like Hong Kong street culture, or the Wong Kar-wai films, which I'm sure everyone here knows, that there was a sense of nostalgia, but the nostalgia was not nostalgia. Nostalgia means longing for something that is gone. The Hong Kong filmmakers in the 90s longed for something that was gone before we lost it, because we knew we were going to lose it. And Wong Kar-wai is of another generation. Christopher Doyle's another generation. I'm not that generation. The generation of the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, they looked at it and said, we're sad that it'll be gone. And it's an early onset of nostalgia. And I think my generation looks at it with, I'm not like saying they did it wrong, because I love those movies. I'm saying it's not just a movie for us, it's our lives. Like we're trying to express something that we feel every day, and I think about every day. And I will live to see 2047. You know, 2046, which is a Wong Kar-wai film, that's not many people who aren't Chinese or who aren't from Hong Kong know that that's about what I'm talking about. 2046 is the last year Hong Kong is Hong Kong. And so my generation of Hong Kong filmmakers look at that and say, or not just Hong Kong filmmakers, anybody really, like the activists, we look at that and say, okay, well, we'll be alive in 2047, and especially I feel that my parents gave me so much, and the fact that I grew up in Hong Kong gave me so much. I grew up with freedom, and every time I go back to visit my grandmother who lives in mainland China, I wonder if they're going to let me in, because many people in the last few years have been jailed for a lot more than what I've said in media publicly or whatever, or for just Instagramming an image saying I support democracy, and so I do feel an obligation to say, instead of just feeling nostalgia for nostalgia's sake, of course, you know, the music in the film is nostalgic, and we're, in some way, the style and the time period, the so-called time period that this film is set in, because you don't really know. Right. There's no internet, there's no phones, there's no TV.
And also the costume design. Like, there's a lot of things about it that really work that it doesn't just leave it in nostalgia. That's I mean I wanted to kind of start there, but it's
that big bridge that the kid says, oh, the pirates built, that is like a hugely politically contentious thing now. The bridge is almost just finished. So it's like kind of out of time. And so how I feel about nostalgia is like, my generation can't just sit there and stand back and do nothing, especially we who were so privileged to grow up in Hong Kong, where we can still say in some way what we feel.
And what I think what's very beautiful about your film is that, I mean, we all experience nostalgia in some way, but there's also something about memory and connection to our past, and then what propels us to our future, right? What brings us forward. And I'm, really curious about, because again, when I think of kind of like that future and, specifically your lead characters, they work so well together. They're also very like distinct and they're very grounded and also kind of light in some ways. It's really quite remarkable. And so I'm curious about, as the director and casting these people and in these very specific roles, if you could talk about that a little bit.
I'm so fortunate because I guess in the so-called industrial terms, you don't get money until you have the actors. And I spent five or 6 years making this film, and in some way it was because Joe Odagiri Joe trusted us to make this film. But actually it was really, how do you find a Chinese girl with white skin? I wanted her to speak Cantonese, as maybe some of you know. People who are in Hong Kong look like me. I don't have white skin. The southern Hong Kong people they're not as pale as northern Chinese people. And certainly if I wanted pale people, then they wouldn't speak Cantonese. And so for years, my producer would tell me, what you're looking for doesn't exist. Wow. And this is one of those classic director-producer arguments, and it was like a very long-standing, oh, you can't do it, yes, I can do it, and if you can't help me, then I'll just do it on my own. And I was really fortunate to have met Angela. Actually, some of you guys went to school with me. She is the girlfriend of a guy I went to high school with. And when I met her maybe 3 years ago, and I was at a birthday party of a friend, and she was sitting next to me, I thought, oh, she looks very close to what I want, but I'm 34, so I never thought she would be someone who could play 18 or 16 or whatever. Right. And then I saw this Instagram photo, and by the way, Instagram is like an amazing casting tool. Like, forget casting directors. Like, why do this old school Hollywood industrial waste of time method?
I was going to say, now I'm worried about different parties I'm at. Like, if I'm with directors.
When you're posting on Instagram?
I notice like all these directors that I know, and they're casting while they're at a party. That's great.
Can I follow your Instagram?
No. I'm a programmer. No one needs to follow my Instagram.
So anyway, when I found it wasn't to make a long story short, it wasn't until I found Angela Yoon that gave me the confidence to say I can make this film, because I looked for a really long time, and in Hong Kong there was a kind of like doldrums for about 10 years. Hong Kong used to make like 300, in the golden age it was like 300, 400 films a year, and I think last year it was 60, because it all moved to the mainland China. Yeah. And so there are very few young Hong Kong actors who, let's just say, money people would care about, or would draw people or give people some kind of excitement. And Angela had never acted a film before, but when I met her, she was exactly what I was looking for. And when I auditioned her, I didn't really audition her, just, you know, it was more just an interview. And I remember that day I went home and I cried for like 2 or 3 hours, because when you spend 5 years making a film, it's just words on a page until you see someone bring it to life.
Yeah.
And I owe her all of that.
And that's incredible. I mean, it's so I mean, it's so wonderful to hear that, if that makes sense. And so then I guess because her not having the acting experience, but her having the look and her, you know, you being able to see the film because you now have casted her or thinking about her in that role. I'm then curious about working with, that's always, it must be so tough. It's like not only your first directed film, but then you're also working with a lead that also hasn't worked in, you know, she's not a professional actress. I mean, not that I necessarily know what that means, but, you know.
I like it.
Okay. Well, how so? Why?
Because I felt like she was an avatar of me. And so I didn't feel like, and by the way, I didn't have that with Joe, who is, I don't know if people, he's like the Johnny Depp of Japan. He's like wildly famous. Today at lunch, I was in a line to get into Swan's Oyster Depot. And there were these Japanese tourists, and I said, oh, I'm here for the film festival. My film is with Odagiri Joe. And they're like, oh. Yeah. And I never have that because I don't live in Japan, but with Angela, I feel like I was very conscious of the fact that I wanted someone there who was just the same version of me.
Well, and then you guys could work off of each other, right? You could kind of figure out your style with someone that is receptive to learning. I would imagine that was a great partnership. She's incredible. I mean, she definitely, like I said, holds her own on the screen. So I also think that speaks to you in your directing as well. It's really quite amazing. I would like to open this up to the audience, because we could also just sit up here and continue to talk, but we do want to open up to the audience with the time that we have left.
Oh, don't give the microphones to my friends. I think they have like popcorn.
If we could get the lights down a little bit, and perhaps to the audience, I would like to see if there's any questions we might have. Yes, we have one right up here.
Oh, how'd
Oh.
you find the space with the big thing on the top?
Cool, actually. I grew up next to a fishing village. Some people here also grew up with me. The fishing village that inspired the film is actually next to the high school that I went to. And if you go, when I was in high school, we had a PE class where it was kayaks, and we would kayak around the bay, and there were still people living there, and we would wave to like grandmas and wave to the grandpas, because it was just old people, and they were washing the clothes by the sea, and it was a fishing village with people living in it and had life. But actually, if you go there now, no one lives there. And so that's where it all came from. But to find a fishing village, because it wasn't the greatest visually, to find the best one actually took a long time. Where we shot is in a village called Tai O, which is about as far as you can get from the city center of Hong Kong. It's about 2.5 hours. And actually, you know, if my producer was here, he would jump up and say, shooting in the village cost us like 20 to 30% more because it was so far away. And we had to live there.
But that was the look that you were going for, right? Or
well, when we went, forget the look. Hong Kong used to be a bunch of fishing villages, but Tai O is the only one left that still, where 3 generations of fishermen live. It's so far away that for like decades there wasn't like a real road that went there, and you had to take like 2 ferries. And so even when I go there now, people still live not so differently than they did like 100 years ago. And the first time I went there to do research, I wanted to have more real people in it, but I realized I wouldn't be able to do it in the time that I wanted to do it because I can't understand anything they say because they all speak this dialect. Like, I had to make friends with this Catholic priest who became my interpreter. I mean, it was very complicated. So it's basically another world. But that was the most authentic village. And what was so beautiful about the village and what inspired me so much was, you know, the shacks are all built above the sea. Throughout southern China and actually most of Southeast Asia, fishermen were second-class citizens and they weren't allowed to own land. So in most of these societies, they built their houses over the sea to get around the law, to have a home that was not their boat. And to me, that was just like such a obvious visual metaphor for disenfranchised people.
Absolutely. Do you have yes, another question right here.
I was wondering, since you wrote the story before, if Joe's character was always foreign, if like their kind of strain of communication was always part of the story, or that just came with, you know, Joe being Japanese himself.
So the question was around if Joe, having written the story and then shot it later, if Joe's character was always foreign, and if that strain for him and in terms of, you know, connecting was always there. Was that written that way?
I feel like a foreigner in Hong Kong most of the time, even though I was born and raised there. Chris is a foreigner, but feels like he is from there. And so this was always part of something we were trying to express about the way we live. There are certainly times before we casted Joe that was like could have been, it doesn't matter as long as he spoke another language. I think that was what was important to us. Although I would never do it again as a director.
Why?
Okay, let me put it this way. Actually, I really liked directing someone who I don't share a language with because it cuts, and especially today, we have so much time and you try to say so much or explain so much. And when I was working with Joe, he understands a bit of English. Actually, I'll tell a funny story later. But Joe, when I was directing Joe, I had to distill everything to the simplest thing, to like the simplest way I could express my ideas. And I really liked that because I don't want to blab on forever. And then he's like, I don't know what you said. All I want to say is 10 words. He knows the script. And to be honest, I think most scripts are overwritten and has too many words because cinema is visual. But I would never do it again. Not that I would never work with Joe again. What I would never do again is shoot a movie in 14 days in 3 languages.
I mean, I was going to ask you how long it took you in here.
Because I had an interpreter, a Japanese interpreter on set, and it made everything really slow.
I mean, 14 days is very quick for those of you that are not like familiar with independent filmmaking.
We didn't have enough money.
It's incredible, like what you accomplished.
Thank you.
To give you an idea in terms of like independent features, even if I'm not getting into your budget, but it typically is 30 days, so twice that, and that's even at 30 days, it's very tight. So that's
well, I'll tell you why it was 14 days. So
yeah.
Originally, we were going to shoot for 25 days, and then my producer at the last minute tells me, actually, it's not really his fault. He went through the whole thing, looked at my script finally, and was like, whoa, it's 25 days. And it's like 50, 60, 70% more than what we budgeted at. I said, okay, well, we're still waiting for the last 20% of 10 million to come in. And this was October and November. I said, I've been trying to make this film for 5 years. We have some money. I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna make it no matter what. And I don't care what you say. It doesn't matter to me. I'm gonna make it this year. And I refused. I refused.
I just feel like we need to
and
have that for like every independent filmmaker. We're just gonna repeat that.
But a 25-day budget became a 14-day budget, and the film's not perfect, you know. Like, feel free to throw it all out there, but I don't know. It's like, it's not a commercial film. I'll say that, especially where I come from, because this is not it's a very politically sensitive message, and I come from, and it's saying something that this film was banned in China. My last film was banned in China, which makes me. I'm not saying that as a badge of honor. I'm just saying.
Well, I was gonna say,
it's not easy.
Perhaps I would like to perhaps maybe argue with you on the fact that the film is not. You when you say, or you're saying negative things about your film, I mean, your film resonates. It's beautiful. There's something about your characters that are very honest, and it comes through. So it doesn't. Perhaps what you might see, I think, as maybe it's in shortness of production or things that you would have liked to do, which again I think is the magic of cinema. Like, we don't know the whole backstory, but what we see on screen is what we're able to experience, and I think it worked. I don't know what you guys thought, but I did. So it really actually creates like a beautiful portrait, and there's there's the characters that you represent that are relatable, and which is interesting that you say is like, what is mainstream, because it's like we're all outsiders and like finding one another and how we can connect, and then how we can also cause change. And I don't know, I could go on, but I'm not gonna.
Okay, I'll tell you something. Okay. This is a Hong Kong film. This is listed in the program as a Hong Kong film. Mm-hmm. My producer, my AD, doesn't think it's they don't think it's a Hong Kong film.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's absurd. And you know what I said? I am used to this my whole life.
Yeah.
I was educated in a Western way. Even though I grew up in Hong Kong, I speak fluent Cantonese, obviously. They say, well, forget my producers. The AD I really grilled. And I like him. Yeah. Let's just put that out there. I like him. And he did a really good job for me. And he watched the rough cut. He's like, it's not a really Hong Kong film. I said, oh, why? And he said, oh, you have a foreign cast. I said, what? The whole film is in Cantonese. Mm-hmm. It's like one Japanese protagonist out of 3 protagonists. The other 2 are Chinese. I think it has to do with what I said earlier about Hong Kong people feeling like they need to protect something that is essentially Hong Kong. I don't blame him for saying that to me. I just think that in the recent years, for better or worse, because we're all trying to protect where we come from in a certain way, some people have found it a way to say, to define much more narrowly what Hong Kong film can be, which I obviously disagree with.
Well, unfortunately we have to end our conversation, but I know we'll be taking this outside, so please give one more round of applause for Suen. You can see White Girl again, so please make sure to tell your friends and family to come and see it, and please make sure to vote, because every film is up for an audience award, and that means you participating. We hope to see you out at the movies, and Jenny will be outside, probably answering more questions. Thank you.
Okay, it's a good, and I'm gonna end it, and probably good. So, The White Girl movie was pretty good. I would say, oh, excellent. So I would say 5.